Thanks everybody for coming. My voice is a little hoarse. We've had a massive gathering out in the streets of London yesterday, if anybody who was there.
Yes.
It was overwhelming in so many ways, and on the vocal cords as well. I'm going to do my best to make it through. This has been a fantastic panel of speakers, and so every different aspect of imperialism, we want to have that discussion, has been covered, and it's just fantastic. And there's many shades of imperialism, as Chris Williamson so articulately laid out, Peter Ford, Robert, Spike, and Tim as well. And what Greg alluded to just a minute ago, and what Peter so rightly identified is it's here and now. The clear and present danger has arrived. And I'm going to go into details just to show you exactly how that's constructed, how it's going to appear in your everyday life, and it's going to increase in the coming weeks, in the coming months, and how we need to view this, what mindset we need to adopt in order to first understand it's happening and share that with people out in your immediate peer group, friends, family, things like this. So there's many shades of imperialism, and what I'm going to say first is, in so many ways, the global machine, the world order, let's say the post-World War II order, has in many ways run out of places to colonize in the way that it used to in previous generations, and that colonization is happening at home now in Western civilization. We are being colonized, and I'm not talking about territory and property, although that's an issue. I'm talking about every aspect of your life. It's being colonized. You're being commodified on every level, every bit of data, every interaction you have with everything on your smartphone apps or your appliances or things that you buy, and whatever you produce is producing a commodity that's fueling this system. This is a form of imperialism, and it has come home, okay, to roost. So, firstly, imperialism in the 20th century, it revolved around hard power or military power, and later in the 20th century, something came along which was given a name called soft power. And this is imperialism through media, through culture, through the power of media, the power of culture. And of course the West executed this to great effect. And then in the early 2000s, soft power became smart power. And this was imperialism through NGOs, through humanitarian organizations, to create narratives, to build fifth columns within countries, or a fifth column within the greater intelligentsia of the liberal Western community, let's say, the humanitarians that Peter Ford was talking about. That's smart power. We saw that to great effect in Syria, and building this opposition to the, quote, Assad regime or to the Putin regime. And so this plays out in the media and through NGOs, through charities, through groups that normally you would support, like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, taking a very bellicose position on a conflict like Syria. That's smart power personified. And it's happening in Myanmar right now. And it happened in Libya before that, and so on and so forth. Okay. So the object of this old imperialism was to effect regime change and to dominate regions and markets, or to open up markets for Western corporations. Okay. That was one of the main functions of that imperialism. Its primacy was the final victory of the post-World War II Anglo-American-led liberal world order. And that world order, as Peter also said, is coming to a close. It's now becoming something else. That caterpillar is becoming something else as we speak. So as awesome as that system was and sounds, it pales in comparison to the system, the new system that is emerging right now. And I'm talking about what is still an Anglo-American and European-led embryonic global combine, there's no better word to describe it, which is now coming into view. So some of you have heard of the Great Reset, okay, or the Great Currency Reset. I assure you these are very real, and these are being codified into policy as we speak. You're not hearing about it debated on the floor of government. It's not happening on the BBC. They're giving lip service to it, or maybe calling it a conspiracy theory for the last 12 months, but it has made its way into policy, maybe into law, okay? So be under no illusions. That world order, this world order is extremely real, and the agenda has been fast-tracked in the year from the year 2020. The pandemic, under the guise of the global pandemic crisis, this is accelerating at a speed that we have never seen before in history, modern history or human history, full stop. So this world order seeks to reimagine the global economy, reimagine, I'm using their words, the global society, to even redefine human relations. And I think we all got a taste of that over the last 15 months, what that redefining human relations is like, that new normal, as we're told. So just as with the 2009 financial crisis, that bailout, the government this time took it upon itself to pick who will be the winners and who will be the losers. And the losers should be obvious for everybody: small to medium-sized businesses, the high street, the pulse of the real vibrant economy, the continuity of communities, generational continuity, that's been crushed underfoot, okay? Because the government has chosen the winners and the losers. The hospitality industry, family-owned businesses, live music, independent venues, all the things that make your town a town, make your community a community. Okay, these sort of establishments have not been destroyed by any pandemic, but by government policy. So they were crushed to make way. What these were crushed to make way for is a ubiquitous corporate monoculture. There's no question about this now. We've seen the results of it. And one that demands total conformity and total domination of what was once the marketplace. It's no longer a marketplace. So these transnational corporate monopolies, Big Pharma is a major recipient of this, and the Silicon Valley digital giants. These are three of the biggest players of this. So these are the winners of the quote pandemic over the last 15 months. That's not up for debate. This is what the Financial Times is saying. This is what the Telegraph has said. This is what mainstream media has told us. These have been the big winners from the crisis. And the list of losers is a very long list. So they are, in effect, have taken advantage over all of the other victims of the shutdowns by virtue of the fact that because of their size and their market share, that they were and still remain the only businesses that can survive in this new post-COVID, hyper-regulated environment, health and safety theme park. Only these companies can afford to survive in that type of environment. Everybody else, it's going to make it not profitable to be in business. So these are the essential businesses and corporations. Everybody else is unessential or non-essential. So the game is very much rigged, but it's government who has rigged this game. Just as they did in 2009 with TARP payments, a financial bailout. What we're seeing now, it dwarfs what we saw in 2009. So the Wall Street Journal admit big tech companies reap gains as COVID-19 fuels a shift in demand, led by Amazon's fourth quarter earnings, triple profits from one of the world's biggest corporations. So it's making it clear that big business has dominated through this crisis. But what's really driving this agenda? There is more behind it. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, he's now heading the UN's Green Economy Department, by the way. Okay, he said in a 2019 Guardian interview before this crisis began, he said, there will be industries, sectors, and firms that do very well during this process. He's calling the Green New Deal process. Okay? But, you know, they will be part of the solution, he said. But there will also be ones that lag behind. And I quote, he said, they will be punished, said Mark Carney. That he said, they will be punished. And I think we've seen that punishment over the last 15 months. And we will continue to see those businesses be punished, those institutions, those organizations. Communities will also reap the blowback from that as well. So, indeed, they were punished. Hundreds of thousands of businesses, tens of millions of employees have already been punished and made redundant, forced into bankruptcy. Okay, and according to Carney and the World Economic Forum in Davos, this is only the beginning of a process of reimagining the global economy and society. So, the question is then, will there be a global reckoning as to whether this unprecedented global government reaction, this coordinated reaction to the coronavirus did more damage and indeed took more life in the end than the supposed pandemic itself? Is that reckoning going to happen? This is the question. Or is another crisis going to quickly come to bury this last one under a heap of ash? This is what people are worried about. So, in all of this, for last year's seasonal respiratory virus, according to the government's own official statistics. So, did the cure do more damage than the disease? Fundamental question. Fundamental question. So, and if that wasn't enough, big tech, transnational monopolies, they're partnering with Five Eyes countries, US, UK, Canada, Australia, along with Europe, to further capitalize on this calamity, pushing for a global digital ID system, sold under the increasingly vapid guise of speed, convenience, and safety. Don't forget how many libertarians opposed this agenda or a national ID card or anything along these lines, including the current Premier of Britain, only just a few years ago. So, I don't know about you, but I think we have enough safety and enough convenience in our lives already. Some people want more, I guess. But the problem is when that safety and when that convenience and when saving money starts to intrude on your basic fundamental rights and what society is constructed from, okay, then it becomes a problem. Are we having this debate? Not yet. Not by any serious account. So there's a number of these bargaining chips now. Your remaining civil liberties have become bargaining chips with the state. And in exchange for emergency measures or compliance with new emergency measures. So the biggest of this falls under the heading of immunity passports, health passports, whichever name you give it, doesn't matter. What matters is what conditions come with it when you opt in to such a system. Peter talked about what happened to the left, and we stood in front of Parliament today, meeting some people out in Parliament Square. Behind us is the House of Parliament. And I just thought to myself, when we were speaking about this issue, and I thought to myself, I wonder what Tony Benn would have thought about all of this. And what Tony Benn would think about the Great Reset, or digital IDs, or vaccine passports, and so forth. Because he understood, the great politician Tony Benn, a man of the left, understood what the people in that building were capable of, given a chance. So where are the Tony Benns of today on the liberal left? This is the question. So in 2021, 20 years of war on terror has given way to a new war, a war on bioterror. Only this time the enemy is invisible and everyone is a potential threat to everybody else. And like the war on terror, this crisis demands a new normal. A whole new raft of biosecurity and biosurveillance measures and rules and security barriers, all to protect you from a brand new threat. It should sound and ring familiar, but this is on a level we've never imagined before, even by war on terror standards. So interestingly, the EU rolled out the marketing push for this passport. They called it a green pass. They had a little pushback and it was quickly rebranded as a digital wallet. And it made its way through the bureaucratic system much quicker. So, and again, sold to the public, saving money, safe, efficient, and so forth. In reality, the savings are nominal. They're not significant savings, certainly not compared to what we've dumped into the financial markets in terms of corporate welfare and bailouts and stimulus checks and furlough and everything else over the last 15 months. So now, in order to carry this thing with your updated health status, your medical records, along with every other system, and your financial history, that's where this app will be headed. It is centralizing. There's no question about it. If you want to look into the future, China has multi-purpose apps that are integrated like this, like WeChat. It's a track and trace app, a purchasing app, it's your Facebook chat, all wrapped into one. And who has access to that? The state does. So this is the number one question that we need to ask ourselves. So with a hyper-digitalized, centralized system, this means that this tool of convenience, giving people access, inclusive technology, these all sound really good, but it will invariably be used to exclude global citizens who do not comply with the latest and constantly evolving diktats coming from various government ministries, or forget about government, just corporate policy. So, and despite pledges from various ministers that all of your data will not be shared to third parties, the reality is that it will be shared and analyzed and acted upon by multiple departments within the ever-expanding super-state apparatus. So it might not be shared to a third party, maybe they might guarantee you that. It will be shared amongst a growing machine. So alongside the mission creep of global governance, we see an increasing call for global solutions, for a global reaction, for global systems to be implemented. This is what we've seen fast-tracked over the last 15 months. But what many in the media and civil advocacy groups do not realize yet is that these digital solutions are becoming increasingly unaccountable, opaque, mired in technical jargon, and government super bureaucracies are using these to exact powers of control and coercion. We're already beginning to see this play out now. How far does it go? How far can this go? So while restricting travel based on one's inoculation status would have been unthinkable just 18 months ago, there is a deeper, more fundamental level even than this in terms of penetration into something that a person will cede in terms of their last vestiges of personal sovereignty and liberty, which is the control over the money you hold in your digital wallet. So consider a recent statement by Tom Mutton, director, not governor, but director of the Bank of England, who called on government ministers just this last week to ultimately make a decision on whether the new central bank digital currency that they're proposing can be programmable or not. What does that mean, programmable currency? They're talking about it last week. So ultimately, this gives the issuer control over how money is spent and on what. And at that point, it ceases to be money. It becomes a voucher. It becomes a coupon. So consider how many millions of people have been moved on to, quote, social credit, or UBI, over the last 15 months because of the crisis. And then that's a crisis that's, again, due to government-imposed shutdowns. So government creates the problem, and government will now offer the solution. Or in this case, the Bank of England is offering a solution. Same in the United States, by the way, with the digital dollar being proposed. So your new digital currency will be coded for use on specific items only if you fall into a certain category in terms of your social credit. Is this the system that is being constructed now as we speak? It certainly looks like it might be. And certainly there is a cause for alarm here. So in other words, the issuer of the transaction can place restrictions on how you spend it. And even when it's released, it could be held in stasis and released at the end of the month. So you can look at it for a month. Or it could disappear. I don't know if it would go that far. So if you don't believe me, you can go look that up for yourself on your smartphone now. But they're discussing this as we speak, but you're not going to hear this debated on the BBC, certainly not, or any mainstream media platform, or at question time. The media will eventually tell you about it after government ministers have decided that it's going to be policy. And this is where the fundamental function of government is breaking down time and time again right now. They're not taking the pulse of the electorate. The media is not raising and elevating issues to rally around, to have a debate. It's not appearing in question time. All of this is being done in committee. It's being done quietly, and it is foisted upon the public after it's been decided that it's the best solution. But we don't need to know the details because it's just too technical. This is the danger of this creep that we're heading into. So that will fundamentally change your relationship with the state, with others, with business, with faceless corporations, and it will redefine human relations as we know it. So there's going to be no public debate about this. Technocrats will simply want to execute their policy and advance their smart global technological solution. This is the new normal, which the self-styled global managerial class are so enthralled with at the moment. It is what the World Economic Forum in Davos are selling to governments. It's what other global stakeholders, like oligarchs and foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others, they're all heavily invested into this future. Microsoft's ID 2020, there's so many other companies and corporations vying for this huge contract globally, or to be one of many that will be seen as adopters for this new platform. So this new class of elites believe that their ideas, their solutions are superior, and that by virtue of their own wealth, their power, their influence that they've accumulated through the replication of digital codes and applications and building user bases, that due to all of this, it gives them the credentials and the technical authority to implement all of these so-called solutions. And our politicians are relatively clueless, most of them anyway, as to what this juggernaut is. So often, these solutions to these problems are actually created by the same bloated digital leviathan. And you can see the track that we're currently going into as a civilization. So the global combine, they want to replace the current economic system, but with what? So the global economy needs something else to back it. This is beyond Bretton Woods. This is beyond the oil-backed dollar. We're into a new phase now. What is going to back this new digital global currency, if you want to call it a currency? And it's going to be backed by green concerns. This is markets which will be replaced by stakeholder capitalism or mission-based capitalism. This is beyond anything that we have had before, although you can see aspects of this in China right now in terms of a command and control economy. But our governments are now doing the exact same thing. They have done at least for the last year. We've seen the results of it. So now that we see what's coming into view, how is this going to be labeled? You're going to see terms like environmentally sustainable governance, ESG attributes. These will be used to rate green assets, just like bond ratings that we currently have. So they'll reinflate the carbon market. They tried it a couple of years ago, and Al Gore cashed out before the price collapsed on carbon per ton. He did. The Chicago Climate Exchange. They'll reinflate the carbon markets, and this is all part of the financialization of nature. This is happening. Those of you who have looked into this or read about it, you know what I'm talking about. But you won't hear it again on mainstream media. But it requires an ongoing climate crisis to fuel its moral and social imperative, to give a pretext for this transition. So this radical plan is designed by the very same oligarchs who are currently using this crisis to drain what is left of the current financial system, squeezing the last drop out of the money markets as we speak, positioning themselves to dominate at the ground level of the new economic order and dominate for the next 100 years, just like the Rockefellers, just like the Morgans, just like the oligarchs and the robber barons of days gone by. This is the new normal coming into view. So this is corporate feudalism. I can't think of a better word to describe it. And this new green bubble will be the final bubble of bubbles. So we're talking about a post-sovereign era, a post-democratic era. UN Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. If you read these documents, it's all laid out very clear. We were just missing the mechanism. We didn't know before, and now we can see what the mechanism is going to be. So this is a return to the eras of sultans, of emperors. So what you've witnessed over the last year or so, it's a return to medieval style policies. Pandemic mitigation policies that you would have seen in the medieval days. This is what it passes for policy today. So for this neoliberal transnational combine, there is no other alternative. This is globalized, digital command and control. It demands uniformity, individual rights, freedoms, even private property, political dissent, certainly, will eventually succumb to this system. So in the words of World Economic Forum founder and intellectual leader of the new technocracy movement, Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. What you want, you will rent, and it will be delivered by drone. I'm not sure about the last part. But in their eyes, humanity can only achieve salvation through the digitalization of life and society. There is no other alternative, according to this dogmatic belief system. So if you step back and look at what just happened over the last 15 months, you'll quickly see that what really went viral was the corporate cult of uniformity, of centralization, of hyper-globalization policy, globalized narratives, globalized censorship. And so what people don't realize about censorship is when something is censored in the US by Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, that's censored globally. That's the new global commons for now. So that censorship cascades globally. Elections can be targeted, issues can be flagged, and we're seeing the results of this today. We've all been victims of this. Pretty much everybody on this panel, myself included, multiple times, still am. So this is a lot of power to regulate speech. This is a lot of power, and it is global. These are US corporations, but they're acting globally. And this is important, sometimes important information that could save lives, but most people won't even hear it or see it. Or it won't reach critical mass in order to create a consensus that's necessary to put a check on government. That's not happening. What's the result of this? Policies run out of control. It's a disaster in many respects. This is the danger. So this is the problem with the big tech, with this much power. Clearly, they are not really fit for purpose to be the arbiter of what's true or what's false or what's medical misinformation. or what goes against the WHO, the World Health Organization's guidelines, which change every week, or any government agency for that matter. That's from YouTube's own terms and conditions. So this means that any viewpoints or information that can be erased by a single corporation or a group of corporations acting as a cartel. They share information about which websites to ban. That's also come to light over the last few months. Even on the floor of the US Senate, that was shown to be the case. So nothing is tolerated. The Germans have a word for this. It's called Gleichschaltung. And so now let's scale that up to a geopolitical level. In 2018, the G7, the group of 7 nations, adopted Gleichschaltung. I say that's how I describe what they've done. As a governing principle in the form of their rapid response mechanism. This means, this is official, this means that following any major geopolitical event or crisis, all of the leaders of the G7 will stay on message and echo the same narrative. So if the US or Britain attribute blame for some incident, all the other G7 members must follow their lead. Whether it's for the alleged Duma chemical attack, or the Skripal Novichok incident, or the dubious downing of MH17 in 2014. That whatever the issue is, lockdowns, the border closures, the latest variant, okay?
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Whatever it is, they all must come out with the same narrative. They've agreed on this. It's almost by treaty. This is very dangerous. So once it's decided on, these uniform narratives are then handed down to mainstream media, stenographers, who doodly repeat them ad nauseum. So their function is no longer to hold power to account, but to bolster power by manufacturing a consensus on any issue. And this extends to NATO policy as well. This is under the Gleichschaltung regime. So once a broad consensus is reached, then they can manufacture consent on the issue. And that's for any policy or any intervention by governments. So, and in China, for instance, if the policy of the US or Britain is that China is responsible for the lab leak, then all of the G7 countries have to fall into line on that narrative. And that would bring you one step closer to a geopolitical conflict. Or at least tensions could be raised indefinitely. Long-term, low-intensity conflict, which is good for business, by the way. So, how long before this type of uniformity extends to policies and laws? We've never had to ask ourselves this type of question. Look at Brexit. Britain left the EU, but Britain adopts the identical policies as France before lockdown, as Germany, every single European country. The group of 7 were almost identical in their policies. So what happened to sovereignty? What happened to independent governance, as they said? So, and again, civil liberties are becoming an inconvenience to this new technocracy, if not redundant already. So all of this is very well finely tuned, honed by the state's behavioral insights teams, weaponized by applied behavioral psychology departments. So, this is what a technocracy looks like. You can see it now. So never in human history has this level of power and technological resources been accumulated by the state, never in history. And left unchecked, left to fester in its own self-referential ideological bubbles, their intellectual ghettos. Okay, this will lead to an end of democracy and constitutional or republican forms of government, full stop. We're halfway there already. So you probably heard the slogan, "Build Back Better." So how could you have not heard this slogan? So it's the mantra of the World Economic Forum, and it's blazoned across every politician's logo boards whenever they're giving a press conference now. Whether it's Canada with Justin Trudeau or Dan Andrews in the state of Victoria in Australia, or Boris Johnson, or Joe Biden's presidential campaign. It was a campaign slogan for a US president. We've never seen this before. The ideas, slogans are coming from Switzerland and basically being meted out with all of the G7 leaders. This is very strange. How did this come to happen? So they can all repeat it, but what does it really mean? Build back better. So it assumes that something has been destroyed and needs to be rebuilt, like a post-war reconstruction. Only we haven't had the military war. So what are we looking at here? Something was destroyed. Our economy was destroyed. Our communities were destroyed. Our societies have been destroyed. Okay? But there's only one culprit for this, and it is government policy. This is beyond debate. No matter what the press or the media tries to spin it at. So this is the nub of the rules-based international order that we hear so much about. We make the rules, as they say. He who has the gold makes the rules, or the digital gold. We keep hearing about that. And we remind ourselves, again, the predictability of lockdowns, of an economic implosion, of paying people to stay home and not work. You know, what severing supply chains, that wasn't done by any party goal, that was done by policy, deliberately, some might think. So endless bailouts, what's the cost of this? Endless stimulus checks, quantitative easing on a scale that the whole money that's been created over the last 15 months is the equivalent to almost all the money in circulation in history, certainly for the United States. That's the case. It's insane. And nobody's talking about this. Nobody's really raising the alarm. So governments did that. Their policies, their interventions, they destroyed those economies, those communities. They severed the social contract. And now they want to build it back better. Problem, reaction, solution. So only no member of the public was ever consulted about this reconstruction project. We never debated it, we never voted on it, but it was made to order on a silver salver. Somehow it was ready to go, which is quite extraordinary. But if you go to the World Economic Forum's website, it's actually all mapped out in March of 2020. You just have to go there, and some of it might still be up there. It's certainly interesting reading that I recommend. So we didn't vote on it. We didn't vote to inflate, to reinflate the currency, to inflate it again 3 times in the last year and a bit, to expand the money supply, which devalues the currency or the money in your pocket. Spending power diminishes. That's what happened and will continue to happen. So the last 15 months has seen what's arguably the most rapid single greatest redistribution of wealth and most profound reconsolidation of power in human history in the fastest and quickest amount of time. So this is a new technocratic world order. Call it what it is. It is a technocracy. It's not a democracy. And again, we were never consulted about it. It's not a revolution of technology, it's a counter-revolution against the Enlightenment, against the flourishing of democratic systems and Republican forms of government. This is the counter-revolution that we're witnessing right now. There's no question about that. So, and this is important to understand, this is not a left or a right issue. More and more, the left-right paradigm is very much a reflection of, our structure of the last 2 centuries. But more and more what we're seeing now in the early 21st century is there is no left versus right. There is only up versus down.
Yes.
And what is up is pressing down. And that is the paradigm increasingly that we find ourselves into. Again, it's a return to a feudalistic paradigm with medieval style policies, and it is brutal. in terms of the disparity that we're seeing right now. It's historic. So I don't blame the oligarchs. They probably think they've done pretty well for themselves, statistically, and in terms of their wealth, and they've expanded the wealth gap beyond anything we've ever seen before, globally. So they probably think that they are, in fact, the rightful rulers of this global planetary fiefdom. I'm sure they wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and believe that that's the case. Certainly, if you're that rich and powerful and you own every single government in every single Western country and every single academic institution to produce papers and studies and truth to suit your own long-term ideological and financial interests, you think that you probably are qualified to run this planet. No doubt about that. So it's here, is what we're saying. It's here. So is this something that you can resist? And if so, what does it take to resist this? Is there any hope in resisting this? I think you have to now go back to first principles. And we were sold this idea that we made it. After the Second World War, we made it. Democracy has won. Fascism was defeated. We've closed the wealth gap. We've fought world hunger. We've knocked disease on the head. So many victories over the last 70 years. Okay? But we also fooled ourselves because we thought this was something that you can win and then it's permanent. Once you win it, once you attain it, it's permanent. And I have rights and I have freedoms. Okay? That's not the case. And we know that now after the last 15 months. The problem was we didn't know that 15 months ago. We weren't sure what we were up against. And now we do. Now we do. The trepidation before the battle is over, it should be anyway. You have a very clear look at what you're dealing with now. And so I think we need to adopt first principles. Stop asking to preserve our civil liberties and start asking for our freedoms, not asking. In fact, you may have to take your freedoms. You have to defend your rights. You have to say no.
Yes! Yes!
So do we want to do that? Who wants to do that? This is a difficult step because we have really been asleep for a few decades. We didn't have to be awake. We have done very well in this hemisphere of the globe post-World War II. Much at the expense of everybody else, of course, and this is what imperialism embodies at the end of the day. So that's the question we need to ask ourselves. But don't think for a second that what you are facing now at home is anything different than what other people in foreign countries have been facing for decades. Colonialism has come home to roost. The war has come home. So we need to wake up to this and start talking and start discussing this, start demanding more from our press, start demanding more from our institutions. And it might be that we have to organize parallel institutions. This is already happening here and in other places. So maybe out of this dark cloud will come many silver linings. There's no doubt about this. But to be realistic about what you're up against, that is probably the most important thing I think to take away from this discussion tonight. And I want to thank this great panel. It's been very educational for me too. It's listed all of you. But thank you, and Greg, for another fantastic event.
Thank you.